Good afternoon. It's 80 something, not much of a wind, but the sun is out. It's beautiful. I don't know about you, but yesterday I was distracted by the depravity of humankind, men and women alike, who could feel so little for other humans that they would insist on hateful public policies and actually celebrate it. I found myself listening to men and women saying they were so glad they could have their AR-15s now. On Twitter today, I put the question, why does one get an AR-15? What kind of person needs an AR-15? What does a person with an AR-15 do? When I was younger and talked to some recruiters, I asked them what was the principal reason that he heard from the people he tried to get into the service, why they wanted to go in. And he said they wanted to blow things up. Now, maybe I understand that in the period of 17 to 20 something, but this is kind of a hyper version of the 4th of July, and it has another significant difference. And it is that you're not just making noise, it is that you're actually trying to kill and shoot people. So that's one thing about war. And the theory, I suppose, is that war is necessary because it's always a war of defense. It's a war of defense in part because we lie about how we get into the war. Remember the Maine, the Gulf of Tonkin, weapons of mass destruction, you know the background. But here we are in peacetime. Why do we need an assault weapon? We don't. I saw a cartoon today where some fellow said he did his hunting with his AR-15 and then he has the stuffed creatures he killed on the wall with portions missing because AR-15 just blows away the body, and so that there isn't nothing left to stuff. So that's guns. And then we also have the Roe v. Wade decision. And these two decisions fit a three-hander. The Gore-Bush Supreme Court decision, more remote, the year 2000, December. The Heller decision that said, nah, you don't need to know anything about militias. You have an absolute right to guns. And then we have another joker. And I can't say they're too dumb to do better because I think it's worse than that. They know exactly what they're doing. They know what is the law, and they're choosing to make it something else. So what am I saying? The predicate for the Roe v. Wade decision is that you women do not have a right of privacy. But to say you don't have a right of privacy, because the word privacy was never spoken by the founding fathers, no women, by the way, the word of privacy finds itself into the protection of the person, that you cannot be seized, that your property cannot be seized, that your place cannot be invaded, which were complaints against the British for just going in and quartering troops and everything else. That was all about privacy, curtilage, you know. And what happened was when Justice Douglas was looking at the laws in Connecticut making it a crime for a woman to use contraceptives, he described the penumbra, the glow around these rights, that is, to be let alone in the Fourth Amendment, the search and seizure requirements, the Fifth, due process, and so forth. This became what? Privacy. And we have express statutes across the country about privacy. We have laws that say you cannot tape people. We have all sorts of notions of privacy, but women may not have privacy. And there is no exception to this. So it seems to me, under the post-Civil War rules, that you're making a woman a slave to perhaps an act by a relative who had his way with her, or she was raped, or she risks death if she does not have an abortion. And I think we as people will find a way, and we're going to enter into that period where those can afford it, and those who can travel, and those who are helped will get all the abortions that they need and should have. The notion that we could increase the number of guns by saying, yeah, go ahead and have guns, almost any sort, and we wave a weak arm of help to those concerned about being killed in a schoolroom or at a local meeting of the school board. And then we're going to have children who are unwanted, abandoned at birth. And I mentioned one in my Twitter, a young man abandoned literally at the hospital, husband or father and mother run away, leave the child. The child's taken on ultimately by grandparents who keep him in a closet and feed him like a dog. So he ultimately is involved in a violent act. So will every person who ends up in these situations perform a violent act? No. But we're not taking care of the children that we're producing now. And so like many of you, I feel a dread at the monsters that inhabit this nation, who would spread guns and violence, who would throw mothers and children into the breach where they have to struggle to survive, a mother with an unwanted child, and a child that's poorly considered, either abandoned or goes through various foster homes and so forth. So what are we to do about that? Well, we will improvise, number one. Some corporations are taking care of some of these things. But as sure as I'm talking to you now, people will die and children will suffer who are forced to come into this world. And people will go to extremes to improvise and be considered criminals. And I look forward to representing those people in court. I think it's a violation of international standards of how a civilization treats its own. I think it violates the Constitution we have. And what we've seen is the politics has now crossed the border into our courts. And no longer can we rely on at least an attempt to try to connect what was past law with present circumstance so that people can rely going forward that the law is something to be trusted. But when you have yahoos on the court who made their deal to get there, and now people like Thomas years later can say outrageous things about, I don't read it, and who knows what he reads. For Christ's sake, there have been all sorts of developments since the Founding Fathers. There have been amendments since the Founding Fathers. There was a Civil War since the Founding Fathers. There has been a change in our economy, in our ability to compromise each other's privacy. We're closer than we ever were. So the first time I heard the words, the Chinese curse, it was at Fordham College, and a good friend of mine was working for Bobby Kennedy, and he had myself and a couple of other fellows spend time with Bobby, and I think he had made a contribution to the speech Bobby was going to give that day. And Bobby Kennedy, with us only feet away from him, said that it was a challenge, an Irish curse, to live in interesting times. Well, we live in those interesting times, but I have the feeling now we had more people of courage in the government then than now. So we the people are the courage who will do the work, perhaps at polls, to push back this attack on traditional democratic values and call out these people who would compromise the life and safety of the innocents, children, their parents, you or I, and that would force women to be slave moms, to bring forth children they don't want, can't afford, to destroy their life and perhaps the life of the offspring for which these people have no capacity to help or save in any way, shape, or form. We see the contours of the failure of preserving and protecting our democracy. We see the chaos of ignoring the law. We see the brutal nature of these people for whom not a word, not a thought, not an empathetic gesture is significant to them because they're only interested in control and power, and the rest be damned. So, that's my meandering thoughts as I walk this trail, which doesn't have the full 88 degrees because we're protected by my trees. Someday you all got to come out here in a bus and walk with me so that you can see how it seems greener this year than it ever did before. All the best. Bye-bye.